Welcome, Charlie Nuermberger, to episode 48 of the podcast here. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been tuning in since your inaugural episode. I've really appreciated what you've done with this. It's been awesome.
Thank you, and it's going to be interesting to talk to you a little bit. I know you pretty well from the art room.
Absolutely.
But in the art room, everyone's always serious, right? You're focused on your painting and whatever it is you're working on. So we haven't really had too many extensive conversations before. So I want to really get to know you a little bit on this episode. I know your brother Sam from coaching him in lacrosse, and I know Jack because we went to Peru together on a trip. So I know your family pretty well, but I'm excited to touch on everything that you've done here at Gilman, senior year now.
Sure.
Everything's been a little bit different this year, but I want to just get the scoop from you. So I'm excited for this.
We've missed you in the art room this year. Yeah, I know it's tougher to get in there with Connelly's COVID precautions. But,
What's it been like this year in there?
It's been tough. I think the thing I miss the most about fully in-person school has got to be the art studio. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think we've really managed to carve out a community and a space in there. It's been guys we've been working with for the past 4 years. Even in the middle school, these are the same crew of guys. So we've really built up this rapport. But it's tough only getting in the studio once or twice a week at the beginning of the year. And not a ton of afternoon sessions either. So just that limited time capacity has been tricky, but we've worked around it. We've had a good time in there.
Are you guys stationed in that senior corner now in the back?
Yeah. I guess one of the silver linings is there's not as many guys coming into school. So I've gotten that whole back wall. I've probably the equivalent of 3 people's spaces this year.
Great.
Yeah, I can totally spread out. I have these big old painting. I'm working on a 4-foot by 6-foot painting right now. It's been a trip for sure. Yeah.
That's great. Where do you I had Tim on, I think that was maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me about how he gets his inspiration for what he works on, and I found his process really unique because he was telling me he takes pictures of certain things that just kind of trigger an idea for him, and he does a lot of abstract art, but I haven't seen too many of your pieces recently. How do you get your inspiration for what you do in the art room? Yeah,
so all of my work at this point has been abstract assemblage, looking at artists like Anselm Kiefer, Robert Rauschenberg, Carrie Moyer. And so it's really about this almost sculptural element of the surface. So I've one hanging up outside in the alcove to the Lumen Center, and it's got these ropes hanging off of it and just contorted chunks of metal and glass. So really it's about this collection of objects and the accumulation of objects over time. They're kind of a symbol of this exploration and experience. So I kind of go about my day, go about my weekend just picking up broken pieces of glass, objects from nature, maybe a turtle shell or something, and then I just throw them all on the canvas. I got razor blades and pieces of metal, feathers, just pieces of paper, all sorts of stuff, as much as I can accumulate on the surface as possible.
Have you always been artistic and into art, or is this something that you picked up in high school, or how has the art experience transpired for you?
Yeah, I think, me and my brothers, we've always been just drawing, and I think we called it sketching when we were younger because coloring sounded too emasculating to us. But yeah, we've always been artistic. Our mom has always helped to cultivate that with us. But yeah, I think you really throw it into full gear in the art program at Gilman. Once you get into the upper school, Connelly really hammers you down with the fundamentals, the drawing and painting courses. And it really takes a while to get a full appreciation of that because it sucks when you're going through it and it's project after project of still lives. But no, once you get to the senior level, you're really thanking him for that instruction. But yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Connelly's teaching style, and especially this year. And I know you talked about your senior speech senior speech about Connelly, and I definitely want to get to that because it's one of my favorite speeches of all time. But
thank you.
what is his teaching style like? And I know a little bit of it because I stand in the back and work on my piece, and he comes around and gives me some instruction. So I know about how he kind of walks around the room and keeps an eye on everyone. But
Sure.
What has his instruction over these 4 years really been like for you, and how has it made you into a better artist?
Yeah, he's a character for sure. I think out of all the faculty that's still left not to be on the podcast, I think you've got to bring him in here if he'll let you. He's an Irish native. He has this accent. And he's a force you have to get used to. You have to acclimate to as soon as you step in the art room. It's like, all the elements there. He's comes over. It's nothing like the middle school art room. I guess I'll compare him to Mr. Anderson. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I touched on this in my senior speech. Connelly will not hesitate to criticize you and your artwork. Just like really viscerally, like he'll say like, oh, like that makes my eyes bleed, like this painting, like it's awful. And I think like in the arts, you need to hear that. You need to know that like there's good paintings and there's bad paintings, and that doesn't make you a good painter or a bad painter. It's hard. It's strenuous. It's exhausting. But yeah, there's a kind of transcendence there that I think Connelly really embodies.
As a young artist, maybe freshman, sophomore year, when you're kind of just getting used to him, how did you take that criticism at first? And then how did you maybe get used to it and start to apply some of his critiques?
Well, you really take it personally. I think the first year, probably into sophomore year, you really take it personally. And it can be a tricky environment to work in. It can be tough to kind of adapt to that and kind of like the erratic nature of that criticism. You'll turn in one piece and he'll be like, fine, like it's fine. And then the next one, it's like he's like, great, this is good progress. And there's like no difference between the two. And so I think one of the best benefits of this teaching style is that he really puts it on you, and it's on you to determine what makes a good painting, what makes a bad painting, because it's harsh advice, but it's also pretty sparse in its application.
Yeah, I think it's really a valuable lesson, just thinking about my experience like playing lacrosse in college and like watching film, and you always have to kind of critique yourself on the screen after a game or after even a practice. And even though coaches will rip you up, and everyone takes that differently. So some people are like, all right, I understand what this coach is trying to tell me. I understand what I need to do to get better. Even though he's saying it in a certain, maybe harsh way,
sure, you
can still take value from the criticism. But other people, maybe it's their first time getting that criticism, and they take it really personally. They get mad about it. But the intention is really to teach, and it sounds like, from everything I've heard about Connelly, is this harsh criticism is really valuable. And you
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And you talked a lot about that in your senior speech.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to learn how to be your own worst critic in the arts and in the academics. Yeah, I think that's been my most valuable thing I've learned from Gilman. Yeah.
Would you say you're pretty self-critical of your own work?
I think so. Yeah, I'd like to think so. Yeah, I think I hold myself to a high standard, for better, for worse. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can really run into a rut with that. But other times, it's been really beneficial in the arts.
Mm-hmm. And your senior speech was one of my favorite ones. And,
Thank you.
And because it was on Zoom webinar, I wish you got to deliver it in front of everyone. Yeah. That's really one of my favorite parts of Gilman, is like everyone standing up and giving us senior applause. But
a real sense of community.
I think it still came through really strongly on the seminar.
Thank you.
How would you maybe summarize? And I know that's hard because it was a long kind of like detailed and descriptive piece. But how would you maybe summarize your message or your takeaway from that speech?
Yeah. So in essence, I talked about this distinction between art making and image making, and that's a big thing in the Gilman Studio program. It's a big thing for the artist Marcel Duchamp. He writes a lot about it in his creative act essays. But essentially, it's this idea that true, valuable, substantive art is really rare. It's all process-based. So I kind of looked at it on three different planes. the artist and their personal inquiry, the piece itself and its realization, its latent realization, and then the community and its interaction with the piece and reaction to the piece. But really, it's about the interplay between all three of those axes. And of course, I tied it to the Gilman High School experience, and be an artist, not an image maker.
Yeah, I love that last line: "Be an artist, not an image maker." So your experience at Gilman, you've gone to Gilman your whole life,
years.
right?
Yeah,
12 years
since first grade. Yeah, 12-year man.
Wow, it's gonna be tough to leave and take the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. I've geared myself up for it, but yeah, I think it's gonna be tougher on my mom than me. But yeah, it's gonna be tricky.
First one out of the house, right?
That's right. Yeah, leaving the nest.
I love it. Well, you're close enough, right? Princeton University, right?
That's right.
It's only an hour. Congratulations on that news.
Thank you.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
What was it like opening up the acceptance letter for Princeton?
Gosh, I think the whole college admissions process at Gilman is tough. I think I definitely came across inadvertently this paradox of Gilman admissions or Gilman exceptionalism, where all through Gilman we're held at this really high standard. It's known as this incredibly rigorous school, highly competitive, and it's Gilman guys can do anything they put their minds to. But then you're kind of pairing that against this college admissions whole thing, and a lot of these top institutions are untouchable. It's nobody gets into those, so they kind of clash against each other, those two ideas. I think it was opening it up. I didn't think I was going to get in. It was a reach for me for sure. I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that I'm going there. It's kind of like an exhilaration. I actually read a couple poems from Crush in the 10 minutes before I opened it up, just to calm my nerves. But yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. It's interesting you were talking about maybe how Gilman prepares you for that next step, because it really is, from my time here, just teaching and observing and watching other teachers teach and seeing how many different extracurriculars and athletics and Paragon, which we'll talk about, everything that students here have their hands in. It's really a lot. I mean, the high school process, and thinking back to it for me, in some ways it's almost harder than college, because in college you have a little bit more time, or it's more regimented.
Sure.
In high school, it's you have to turn this assignment in on Thursday, and you've got only a couple days, and you've got a water polo meet, and you've got something else the next day, and it's a bit more of a time crunch.
Yeah.
But I was actually talking to someone yesterday about how well Gilman sets students up for the next step for college.
I think I love all of the college counselors. Ms. Fonsby has been invaluable to me throughout this whole process. I would be so lost without her guidance throughout all of this. I think to resolve that paradox, the paradox of Gilman exceptionalism, I think you have to separate yourself in some way from that collective identity of Gilman. I think you have to stop being a Gilman man in some respects, and start being an individual, and an individual that's attractive to these institutions. Not that your education at Gilman and the rigor of the courses here and the faculty members here aren't a fundamental part of your application. I think it's recognizing that and showing this is the individual I've become as a result of the tutelage at Gilman, as a result of the programs at Gilman.
Yeah, and again, I think your senior speech communicated that really well, because in my experience too, in college, just people will expect that the type of people that go to Princeton or go to Harvard have dotted all the I's in terms of the SAT, in terms of a 4.0 GPA, in terms of what you think you have to do to get in. And my experience, there are some students like that, right, who have just been exceptional academically and have their extracurriculars and have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. But a majority of the students that I've run into, they were just, they did something that was totally unique to them. They spoke 4 different languages and did this really cool service trip. or they played the ukulele and they were the best at it, right? It was just something that was a little bit different. They put together a mosaic that was, different than the common student or the common perception of what an Ivy League student is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah, I'd agree with you absolutely. I think it's about like carving out your niche there and really like excelling in that smaller space rather than just being the top of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's probably how the art program has maybe rubbed off on you, because I think that's part of it, is art forces you to be a little bit more abstract or different from the crowd. Yeah,
I think the arts especially, everyone's got their own thing going on. Everyone's doing something else. People are doing landscapes and portraits and abstract. I think there's a guy last semester who's doing like architectural sketches. Like everyone's got their own thing going on. And there's definitely a common language between all those. There are all these common threads, and it's a real community. But yeah, everyone has their own thing that they're doing, their own region that they're exploring. I think that's really beneficial. Yeah.
Thinking back on your years here at Gilman, is there a certain class that, and I know art is a huge one, but I know that you're also really into English and literature and maybe some of those humanities classes. Is there a class that you took in middle school or high school or maybe even lower school, if you can remember back then, that really rubbed off on you and made a huge impact on you as a student? Yeah,
absolutely. I think it would be tough to pick between all my English classes. I think I'm going to study English at Princeton next year. I think I would have to go, I'd say Mr. Burns' 7th grade class was awesome. He really kind of throws you into this like space of English that's very attractive to a lot of Gilman guys. I think like it's all bloody and like very masculine, just kind of like rough and tumble. And he was like the greatest teacher for that. Yeah, everyone loved that class and loved the like Jack London and the Hemingway that you read there. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. I think my English class last year was fantastic. I had it over at Bryn Mawr actually, so it was Miss Park, Diana Park, and she was amazing. We read like Beloved by Toni Morrison, Great Gatsby, My Antonia, a lot of these like American classics. And it was always through like a really careful, really precise lens that I appreciate a lot. Mm-hmm. In the high school, Mr. Malkus, I loved his class as well. I think for a project we were doing Tale of Two Cities, and he let me do like a cross section of someone getting guillotined. Like it was like, oh, here's like the carotid artery and here's like the jugular and everything. And that was just like the awesomest thing to me as a 9th grader. Like I love that, and I love that he enabled that freedom of choice there. And Miss Carper in sophomore year is fantastic as well. It was this, I think the texts there in sophomore year are awesome. Like it was the perfect couple texts there, like Things Fall Apart paired with Heart of Darkness is amazing. Frankenstein, the Odyssey. It was like you couldn't pick any better books, and she was really explored that with a speculative lens, and it was an awesome class. Yeah,
that's a 10th grade curriculum is a great selection.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, it's like there's really no like unifying like kind of element to it. It's all just like great literature, and literature everyone should read.
How about your junior year? Was it that you went over to Bryn Mawr?
That's right.
First time. Yeah. What was it like in the coordinate class for the first time? Because I teach American Lit in 11th grade, and that's something that I think about a lot, is having Bryn Mawr and Roland Park and Gilman students all in the same room. What was it like in that setting at Bryn Mawr, and how did the teacher kind of facilitate that?
It's tough. Yeah. I think there's a learning curve for sure. Because at Gilman, like it's just men in that space, and you're so accustomed to kind of like dominating the space, and so you have to learn like your position and your role within the group, and within your class, because a lot of the assessments are group based or class based. So you have your like Harkness discussions and everything, and you have to know like this is my role in the Harkness discussion. And if I overstep that, and if I like dominate the discussion inadvertently, the whole class is going to suffer for that.
It's more of like a team setting in the Harkness table, because we don't do that as much at Gilman, but over there I know they have. Do you just sit down at a huge round table with?
Yeah, and you prepare the night before, and you like read your texts, and you generate your questions, and then it's like a graded discussion. It's like, I hadn't experienced it prior to that class. I think at Bryn Mawr there's also, when you're like one of like 2 or 3 guys in the classroom, there's also like an element of like proving yourself and like feeling you have to prove yourself, and that fades away eventually. Either because you do prove yourself, or you realize that you don't need to in that space. And I think just being in an unfamiliar environment and learning in an unfamiliar environment is really beneficial to all students.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I would agree for sure. So I'm really excited that you're thinking about English next year, obviously, and I'm interested in Richard Siken, because I hadn't read too much. Right. Richard Siken before you told me he was your book rec, but how did you stumble across him?
He, how did I stumble across him? I think it was probably the recommendation of Dr. Smith. I look to him a lot for like what book and what poetry collection I should read. Siken is like a whole new beast. I think if he was the foundational introduction for a lot of people to poetry, I think a lot more guys would be interested and invested in it, especially Gilman guys. Louise Glick, who won the Nobel for Literature last year, she wrote about this collection. She was like, it's all high beams all the time. Like it is frantic and fast paced and bloody, kind of grotesque. Yeah, it's a crazy collection.
I think just from reading a few poems of his, they're not something that you just kind of scan through. It's something that you have to take with you over weeks at a time and really process and think about.
Sure. Yeah, and I think they work just as well, just like reading them like out loud. I think there's a real vocal element to them as well.
Yeah, it's another thing is I looked up some readings on YouTube, and some of the voice, it has to be really the perfect voice, I think.
Absolutely.
But I have to have poetry read to me. Like I'd rather not just sit down and read it quietly. I kind of like, you have to hear poetry. It's a vocal thing, but there are some really good voice selections on YouTube for Siken.
Yeah, I think it has to be kind of like a vulnerable voice. It has to be something fragile. This whole collection, the meta narrative through the collection is like a queer breakup. It's this, he's breaking up with his boyfriend, and it's just like brutal and drawn out, and it's from the moment. The first poem, Scheherazade, in here, is kind of like him coming to the realization that this like self-renewing love has faltered, and then all the way through the end, it's just kind of like coming to terms with breaking up with someone.
So he's got Crush, and then the most recent one,
War
of the Foxes.
This one's called War of the Foxes. It's less critically acclaimed. It's still like, I think, a seminal piece of contemporary poetry. It's really interesting to me as an artist reading this, because there's a lot of crossover with painting in here. He's got a poem on like Caravaggio in here. And,
really?
There's a lot about like painting still lifes. Yeah, like this poem, it's like still life with skulls and bacon. Like he really explores painting and like kind of these intersections with the arts. Yeah,
interesting. Sounds perfect.
It's really
for an artist.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell like he knows what he's talking about. I think there's a danger there with like crossing over some arts and looking at like the common threads that like you're gonna know one better than the other. I think it's pretty clear he knows what he's talking about with that, which I really enjoyed.
What is the title War of the Foxes? Since I haven't read this one, do you know about like what that title is indicating?
Yeah, so it's one of the poems in here is called War of the Foxes, and it's really just this kind of like surreal exploration of a relationship again. And he talks about like it's like personified through these animals. So it starts with like these rabbits, and like they're in their warren, And like the War of the Foxes is this like endless back and forth, kind of like stalemate that he explores there. Yeah, it's a long poem. It's kind of hard to condense, but it's a good one. I think it's one of the better ones in the collection.
Cool. I'm excited to read more of him, and I followed the Richard Siken bot on Twitter, so awesome. I'll get some poetry snippets on my feed, which is good.
Absolutely.
So Paragon is something else you're involved with here at Gilman.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm in the English department, but I don't know too much about Paragon because it's really almost a secretive process throughout the year. And then finally at the end of the year, you release everything that you've been working on.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me a little bit about Paragon and what you've been working on this year?
Yeah, so we're in the heat of it right now. Yeah, we're finishing up all of our final copy edits, our design layouts and everything. So we're really like in the final stages of the process. Paragon's our arts and literary magazine at Gilman. So we collect and publish literature from students, all student generated literature. So fiction, creative nonfiction, memoir, poetry, across the board, we'll take it. And then also like the visual arts, your painting, your drawing, your photography. We take all of it and we publish it in a collection at the end of the year. It's going to be a long one this year. We were talking about before we got started. Yeah, it's going to be like 70 pages, which is long for a collection. Paragon used to really be going with 2 semester editions. So there's a winter one and a spring one. It was defunct for a couple of years, and then me and a couple guys brought it back last year and kind of revived the tradition. Unfortunately, we only got out a digital edition last year just because of COVID and lockdown and everything. But we're on schedule to publish a print edition at the end of this year.
What was it like for you reviving this?
It was daunting. Yeah, it was a lot of work to be done. But we had like a good, small, centralized Gilman staff, student staff. And yeah, I couldn't thank Dr. Smith and Mr. Rao enough last year for sticking with the process. They're clearly just as passionate about the publication as we were, which helped out a lot. And yeah, I'm glad we got it done last year and really set the record straight.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to checking out the final version of it this year.
It's going to be good. Yeah, I think we have some really strong student pieces this year.
It's interesting that you were able to get so many pieces submitted during this year when everything's kind of broken up and you're not able to meet really as a group and recruit guys at lunch and whatnot. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was surprised. We got a lot more submissions than we did last year, which I guess was natural. I think the inclination is to submit more once you see like the final product, and it was tough going last year and starting up without like a kind of notion of like this is what it's going to look like this is where your piece is going to be published. But yeah, I think we've really been rolling since last year.
Awesome. Well, good work there. So maybe one other part of your experience here at Gilman is your water polo career, and I'm curious about how that experience has been for you at Gilman, really how you got into water polo and maybe some memories that stick out to you.
Absolutely.
Storming the pool.
Sure. Yeah, it's an experience. We actually had our what would have been our Storm the Pool game last Thursday. It was our McDonough home game. I wish we could have stormed the pool then because we kind of walked all over them. It was like 19-6 final score, which was awesome. We have a really good team this year.
You can't really storm the pool in a blowout.
No, that's a good point. We had our manager Mason Roth suit up with his swim trunks and his Hawaiian shirt, and he jumped in for us. So it was a one-man storm the pool, I guess, but. We have a match today against Calvert Hall.
Awesome.
Looking to be a good one. And then on Friday we have our MSJ. They're probably going to be our toughest competition this year. That's a home game. I think it's going to be recorded and broadcasted, but
GTV.
Yeah, unfortunately, no student sections in the pool this year.
How'd you get into water polo? When was your first time kind of getting involved with that sport? I kind of wish I got involved with water polo because it seems really fun watching it.
It's really fun. Yeah. It's kind of a unique program at Gilman because with the pool, you're kind of like getting to know and getting to the space and getting to the coach, Von Smith, since like first or second grade. Like it's immediate there. So I've been in the pool. I think I was talking with Coach. I think over quarantine, like the 7 months of quarantine and over the summer was the longest time I've been out of the Gilman pool in 12 years, like over a decade, which is crazy to think about. So yeah, you really get to know at a young age, the program and the coach. Von Smith is like an incredible guy. I think he's another choice. I think you should try to get him on this podcast. He is like absurd. Like he grew up in Zimbabwe. And he just has like story after story of like, oh yeah, like this time we like played polo in an outdoor pool while it was like this lightning storm and like thunder coming on all around. Or like he's like, yeah, like did you know I played rugby in the world championship in Northern Ireland? And we're like, that's crazy. Like he was an Olympian. Like he swam in the Seoul Olympics. Like he is insane, and he's like the sweetest guy. He demands quality, and I think that's why he's built up the program so much and been able to build that up. But yeah, I couldn't compliment the guy enough. He's been a really pivotal part of my Gilman experience.
Best water polo player that you've played with or against, and what does it take to be really talented or successful in the sport of water polo?
I think it was, looking back, Nick Polydefkis was awesome. He's playing at GW now. He's crazy. Brooks Lebo last year was awesome. Looking back, like Seth Hardy is formidable. This year we've got some good guys. Antonio Mendez-Trendler and Ian Rayleigh, they both play down at Navy. Water polo's, being good at water polo is, it's unique. It's like the only sport where you got 3 dimensions of movement. You can go like, it's crazy. It's a lot to keep track of at first. So I think a big part of it is like that body positioning. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I've drawn, like the biggest character education I've drawn from water polo, is just being like aware of my body in this space and like the implications of that, like knowing yourself and your physical form really well is important. And of course, like throwing a couple elbows under the water, you have to know what you can get away with and what you can't.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like soccer in some ways that people say soccer, it's not much of a contact sport, but then when you watch like real soccer players play, they're doing all kinds of things that's not really noticeable. Like under the water, I'm sure it's very physical, and you're dragging guys down and
whatever you can get away with. And all the coaches are like, I'm not going to tell you to kick the guy, but like you know what you have to do.
Yeah, just have to be subtle.
You'll like emerge like out of the water from like our McDonough game was tough. It was a lot of like scratches and like bruises afterwards. It's a pretty brutal game. Yeah, it can be at least.
So Charlie, about to graduate in a month, which is crazy. It flies by, right?
It does. Yeah, for better or for worse.
What are some of the really memories about Gilman School as a place that you're going to take with you and really miss maybe next year and into the future?
Yeah, it's got to be the people. I think that's the lowest common denominator that everyone brings up. It's got to be like the communities that you make and the languages you develop with people. So yeah, looking at like the art studio and the back room, even like our little time we've gotten in there this year, that's been awesome. And like the polo locker room, and just like all the guy talk and conversations you have in there. I think it's just going to be the people. It's going to be the guys I've gotten to know over these 12 years. It's going to be of course, there's going to be the Storm the Pools and the like final publications of Paragon and the art shows and everything. But I think it's going to be the characters, yeah. And sometimes as they're physicalized by spaces like the locker room or the studio, but often it's just like these kind of ephemeral memories of the people and of the conversations you have here.
Awesome relationships that
Absolutely.
You'll take with you, but
yeah.
you know you'll definitely miss the moments as a student
For sure.
at Gilman. So, Charlie, thanks so much for coming on today.
Absolutely.
It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
We touched on everything, right?
Yeah,
that we wanted to get to. So
for sure.
Appreciate the time and best of luck in the next couple of weeks. It's
Thank
be
you.
A fun end of the ride here.
I hope so. May is going to be a wild month. Yeah, it's going to be a ride for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much.